So Samuel O'Connell has a new record coming out as Noxen. It is called Rattlesnake. It's out April the 15th. And, it's been about 4 years since the EP that came out. 4 years is a long time, especially for, a younger person. This is a hard way to ask this question, but I wanted to say, besides COVID, what kind of transpired for you in the 4 year interim between that release and this upcoming release?
Sure. I think the main thing that occurred was that, for starters, it feels like during the pandemic, we received a lot of creative output from the creative community. It just seemed like everybody was creating things. I kind of experienced almost the opposite of that, where I was almost anxious because I was like, I have this unprecedented time to myself, which as a creative person, you always want. But I just was not feeling very inspired, and I wasn't writing and I wasn't recording, and I was just kind of, focusing on my life and working remotely and getting the routine down, etc. And I wasn't feeling very creative. But in the past 4 years, like you said, that is a long time. I have worked really closely to develop a band, which the first EP was primarily a solo project, and I had some friends and family assist as far as mixing and mastering and playing guitar or what have you on a couple songs. But this upcoming album is a full band album, and that's not to say it was very hard to find a band. They're all members of my immediate family, my brothers and sisters. So we've been working on it. We've been playing music forever, and it just felt right to transition from a solo act into this full band experience. And we've kind of the first EP, I intended it to be kind of like a dreamy folk pop experience, where now we're leaning a lot more into the folk dynamic, especially as a family band. I think that hopefully it's a successful transition.
Yeah. So just from a few listens to the album, and I'm really enjoying it so far. And I think it's one of these albums I think I'll continue to enjoy more, because there's a lot of nice things on the surface on the first listen, but I think especially like maybe with some headphones on, there's a lot of nice layers there. And to that end, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about what the process of creating these songs, like what were they sounding like to you, in the very initial stages, sonically, what instruments were you writing on? And then if you could talk a little bit about building them into, the final product that we could hear.
Yeah, it was definitely a humongous learning experience. The first EP I actually recorded in GarageBand myself, and a lot of trial and error. And then I collaborated with a close friend to mix and master that. But this EP I recorded and mixed and mastered entirely on my own. And, I think like a lot of musicians these days, every song for me starts in the voice memos app where you're driving and you got a little tune or something in your head, or some stupid line comes into my brain, and I just kind of spit it out. And it usually starts like that. And, I would say I'm not a traditional, I don't even really view myself as a musician. I view myself as a technician more so, and with creative tendencies. And I love music, so I'm really inspired by music. So how I typically start is I take those voice memos and then I translate that into chords, which I kind of plunk out on a MIDI keyboard, and then from there it just really grows and adding a lot. I add a lot of layers. And my brother Jonathan, who plays guitar in the band and has been my lifelong kind of I'll bring him an idea and he helps me flesh it out. He moved to Pittsburgh during the pandemic, which was pretty brutal to the creative process. But throughout the many years that we've been in this thing, we figured out how to collaborate remotely, and he added his tracks remotely, and then I was able to flesh out the album in an attic in a house in Noxen.
So was this all done kind of on the DIY? Was there any actual studio time booked, or any outside producers or anything like that came in?
No, yeah, this is just all done between during the pandemic. I actually moved in with my partner down in Wilkes-Barre from my home in Noxen, and I started recording the album there. And it was a little bit of a smaller apartment, so I actually had set up a little studio in the stairwell, and I started recording the album there. And then when things started to open back up, I actually returned to Noxen and, you know, built out a little bit, make a creative space in the attic, a makeshift studio, and that's where I recorded the rest of the album, mixed and mastered it.
So for those not from northeastern Pennsylvania, Noxen is a small town near Dallas, Pennsylvania, in the back mountain, which is near Wilkes-Barre. And if you don't know where that is, Wilkes-Barre is near Scranton, and everyone knows where that is now, thanks to Michael Scott and Joe Biden. Yep. But so, you know, obviously choosing the name Noxen, I think we talked about this when you're doing the initial LP, but, you know, choosing the name Noxen is, you know, kind of a statement of whatever you want it to be, you know, your roots, your hometown. And, you know, the name of this album is called Rattlesnake, and Noxen's primary event is the Noxen Rattlesnake Roundup, which, you know, I just, you don't have to get into the history or the detail of that, but the kind of the imagery, the themes and whatnot, there's a little bit of religious imagery going with the song Holy Water. And is there sort of, in a rambling way, I'm kind of asking, are there some sort of like cohesive lyrical themes that maybe link these songs?
Yeah, I mean, at first, I had really desired for it to be a concept album. I had been working on kind of a story. By day, I work as the chief creative officer of Cool Creative, and we do a lot of storytelling and filmmaking and video. So at first I had wanted to do like a concept album that was the story of a family who moved to Noxen, and there's a gang. There actually is this group of people, they call themselves the natives in Noxen, which, you know, in truth, they're just people who like to ride quads and drink beer by the creek, which is a beautiful thing. But when I first moved there, you know, my neighbor has a little, I would say, a tendency to be dramatic. So he's like, you know, you got to be really careful about these natives, and, you know, you got to go out and get a gun. And I moving from the city to Noxen, I was like, oh my God. So I like went to Cabela's and, you know, bought like a child's gun. And I was like, this is a dangerous place. But what ended up happening over the subsequent, you know, years of living there, you know, I found it just to be a lovely place and a lovely community. And to the effect of the Rattlesnake Roundup, you know, it is known for its rattlesnakes, and there's certainly rattlesnakes aplenty up in those mountains, but it just is such a weird little cultural thing that happens there once a year. And, you know, it's kind of like it's the highlight of the year for a lot of the residents, and everyone just gathers at this campground, and there's live music, and there's rattlesnakes on display, and there's a big pit where people catch rattlesnakes and compete to get the biggest snake. And it's kind of it's a weird, quirky northeastern Pennsylvania thing that you know, for whatever reason, if you're wearing a Rattlesnake Roundup shirt and you're in Orlando, someone will be like, oh, the Rattlesnake Roundup. And it's just kind of a fun little thing. But I was certainly inspired by imagery of snakes and serpents. And I think we talked about this last time, but, you know, I grew up very religious, and kind of the imagery of a serpent is something that is very prevalent in Christianity. And I think it was something that kind of struck me. And one of my favorite books growing up also was the Redwall series. It's about little mice who run around with swords, but there's a big antagonist snake there. So I kind of took imagery from that, and the thought of my younger brothers or whatnot having to face off against this large snake. Kind of, I'm getting into the weeds of the story, but my idea was that the natives sacrifice newcomers to this large snake in the mountains. And that's kind of where the album started. And from there, you know, like I had noted, I was having some trouble with being inspired, and I typically have to have something really terrible happen to me to feel inspired. And then you know, I'm all of a sudden super inspired. But really, through the pandemic, it was just this long experience that was just felt very singular and wasn't very inspiring. So I started trying to just find inspiration elsewhere, whether that was riding a dirt bike in Noxen, feeling happy or content, or just experiencing life on this kind of weird little farm in this weird village in northeastern Pennsylvania. That's a long-winded answer.
No, that's fine. Are there any particular, I think it's interesting to talk about kind of the imagery and the literary influences. Were there any particular musical influences that were happening, maybe even subconsciously, that you're noticing now, things you were listening to while writing and recording, or maybe even things you were listening to when you were a kid that were kind of bubbling back up?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say this album as a whole is kind of a tribute to like music that you would hear as a kid from a VHS tape. So really the main one being, I don't know if you ever saw the Disney version of Robin Hood with the Foxes. It's got this really beautiful 60s, folky, musical accompaniment from Roger Miller and a few others. And listening to that on a VHS tape just brings me so much nostalgia and warmth that I was really trying to emulate the feeling of hearing like a folk song as if it was on playing through an old tube TV on a VHS tape, and the tape's a little warped. And then I also listened to a lot of music from the 50s and 60s and more modern music. Lord Huron is a band that I think also looks to emulate that style, and so I look to a lot of that. But as a filmmaker first, I also try to create music that feels cinematic and takes you on a journey, but also has these undertones that you could potentially hear, in a movie or thing.
Since you've started, working on this project, this Noxen project, for the last, I guess, 4 or 5 years, who are some artists in the area, the Northeastern PA region, or even beyond, that you've kind of connected with, collaborated with, played shows with, or worked on their music and vice versa?
For sure. Really inspired lately by Jordan Ramirez and the Tribe. He actually has a feature on the album. He sings with me. He's someone I've known for a really long time, and we actually drove across the country and had all these beautiful experiences. And we had started this song about 4 years ago. It's called The Shepherd, and he and I collaborated on this music. And he's typically a kind of a funk, jam band out kind of vibe, but we made a pretty fun little folk track. And then there's another band. They just released their first album. They're called The Human Beings, and they're from this area. And then their sound is really incredible. And they just put out a full length album. And they actually, the singer from that, Dave, is on one of the songs as well. And then of course Rosary Guild, who is a local band. We played a lot of shows with Rosary Guild, and Will, who is the lead singer, he actually helped mix and master the first album or first EP. They really, we used to just play a lot of shows together. And then one last one is American Buffalo Ghost, who is always making moves and has such an incredible creative output and such a awesome folk sound to them. Super inspiring.
We kind of talked about place. Place is important in your music. It's rooted in where you're from, whether you're using it as a metaphor or just talking straight about this is Noxen, right? But also it's important to music communities. And you could do all the recording you'd like with all the technology now, but if you don't have somewhere to perform live, it's going to maybe hit some sort of wall. So obviously over the years, Scranton Wilkes-Barre has been up and down in that regard, going back to Cafe Metropolis and then Test Pattern in Scranton, Vintage Theater, and now we've had Karl Hall for I think a few years, and you're going to be play there soon. We could talk about that. But do you feel that there are some kind of hubs, some places you could go to perform, to see other acts, to kind of build that community?
It's certainly, even a few years ago, I tried to figure that question out. I had started an app called Tunefly, which was an app that it drops you on a map, and you can join the Wilkes-Barre music scene, and you can see all the venues, and you can join as an artist or as a venue or as just a fan. And certainly when we first started that, we almost did it as a homage to our own music scene, because what we were finding was there are a lot of really awesome bands here that are making music, and it's really inspired music. And we wanted to try to find a way to get the community to connect, because there weren't a lot of places to play. And I would say that's changed a little bit. Certainly over the past few years, it's been difficult, and there's been kind of devastating closures of venues due to the pandemic, and places that people would typically play, or or whatnot. So it's kind of always an ebb and tide, but I do feel like Karl Hall is a kind of a rock in the creek, and it's holding its spot there, and it's a really, I would say, for me, it feels like a cornerstone of our music community, at least in Wilkes-Barre specifically, and that's really where I've played most of our shows is at Karl Hall, and AJ is so supportive of the music. I feel like he would die for any band of the community, and it's like super lovely and inspiring to witness that.
When you are playing live, and I'm going to say this in a way that I'm not trying to denigrate the area or anything, but a lot of the music that one would hear live in northeastern Pennsylvania might be at like a bar or a casino, where it's kind of, the music is meant to be kind of a soundtrack to your socializing and your drinking, and it's, you're not like, maybe it's a cover band, maybe it's an original band that's kind of sounds like a cover band, but the music you're playing is not bar rock by any extent, right? So have there been any challenges? I know Karl Hall, the times I've been there, people tend to listen there. People are there for that reason. But has there been any sort of process or anything of winning people over, or because you're not going in and hitting them over the head with power chords and fist pump. It's not even a pop punk kind of thing. It's you have to listen. You have to want to be there. What has that process been like?
It's really interesting, because I'm definitely very honed in on how people are responding to it, especially live. And as a young adult, I played in a band, and it was kind of more of a rock band, and I was singing, and I would run around, and I was jumping up and down, and I was really engaging I tried to be really intentionally engaging as a front person. And I kind of associate this with my experience with skiing, because I used to rip down the mountain, and then one day I got up, I was on the skis, and I got to the top of the mountain, and I had this fear. And even though I had never had that fear before, I was like, oh my God, I think I'm going to like scooch down this mountain on my butt. Like, cause I don't know if I could do this, even though I've done it before. And I've had that experience recently, just performing and being hyper aware and anxious about getting up on stage. And actually, I just decided, like the last show that we played at Karl Hall in October, I think it was October. I have no recollection of, maybe it was August, or I have no idea. But I was like, this is the last one. I was like, I don't know if I got up there, and I was like, I don't like this anymore. I don't necessarily feel like I want to be up here anymore. And it wasn't nothing about Karl Hall, but it was just about the experience of being up and performing in front of people. And I had kind of just internally decided to just make music and put it out, because I love making music, but I just don't necessarily love the act of performing anymore, is what I had decided then. And then AJ did reach out, and it's about this show on my birthday, and it happened to be on my birthday, and we have this album coming out, and it's like, I think I'm really going to try at this show to have fun again, because I wrapped it into something anxious and really, like you said, I'm just hyper focused on how people are responding to it. And I did know most of the shows we played at have been at Karl Hall, and there's always a really great engaged crowd there. So we've never played at a bar or anything like that, but I think there's probably almost a little bit of I would find relief in that, because not everybody would be focused on looking at me.
That's interesting perspective on it. So that the show we're talking about, that's April 28th, right?
Yeah, April 28th.
So that's your birthday.
Thursday.
So yeah, so early happy birthday. And that's
thanks.
It's a really cool bill, Wild Pink from Brooklyn. And so are you familiar with Wild Pink at all?
Yeah, it's crazy. I had actually just, my Spotify had recently turned me on to them. And that was the other thing. It's just like, well, here's a band that you enjoy genuinely. And so because up until that point, I've only played with our local band, our local friends, and that's been beautiful. And there's like a family feel to it. But to have the opportunity to play with, a touring band was kind of an interesting concept, and was really interested in seeing what that was like. And I do think our sounds complement each other. It's kind of like a indie folk with some electronic elements. So I really, that's at our core. I feel like we're in that space.
Yeah, and I believe Joe Burke and company are on that bill as well. So that you're not going to lose the local flavor either. You're going to get the best of both worlds, I guess.
We played with them before too, and great storytellers, great songwriters, and really excited to once again get a, I'm trying to just have a lot of positive to approach this with a lot of positivity, because like I said, last time I got up on stage I was like, this is the, I don't ever want to do this again, but now I'm excited, and I think it's gonna be fun.
Going back to the album itself, what are the different formats it will be available in?
It's going to be available wherever you can stream, or all your favorite streaming platforms, Spotify, Apple Music, and we've never done any type of merch or physical copies. I think I'm still seeing this as like a hobby, so I don't know if but I spent so much time on this album, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours poured into, from the writing to the mixing, mastering, recording, etc. That, and I do feel like there's, I feel really proud of it. So I think for this one, we're going to try to push it a little harder, a little farther than we typically do. So yeah, there could be other formats down the road.
Are there any other, is there any like multimedia tied to this release, any videos or anything that either you've put out so far or you're planning on doing?
Yeah, we actually are on the tail end of editing together kind of a cinematic music experience that kind of, like I said, there was a little bit of a storyline behind the inception of the album, and we're kind of exploring that in video form. But other than that, we're actually, from creating this and finishing it, we're already working on a quick follow-up EP that we're gonna kind of drop really soon as well. So it's just there's all that time of not being inspired is kind of surfacing as a nice little swell of inspiration.
So as far as the upcoming EP, are you considering that like a part of this album project, or is it kind of a hard break into like a brand new thing?
This is probably a hard break into something brand new. Yeah, it'll feel similar tonally, but different inspirations and kind of just a different theme, I would say.
One thing I skipped over when we were talking about the live aspect of this. Could you tell me a little bit about the process of taking these songs, from the recorded products, and are you trying to replicate the album on stage? Are you trying to do a different version, a stripped down version? And also, who, if you could name who will be helping with that, who will be in your band for this show, Karl Hall?
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely a challenge because, like I said, I start all of this by myself with a computer and a MIDI keyboard. And I don't typically bring a keyboard to perform. So there's a lot of sounds and a layer that is missing when you play that live. So typically in this album, we focus more on organic sound. So we have my guitar player, who's my brother, Jonathan. There's my little brother, David, who plays the bass, excellent bass player, just graduated high school. He's in college now, but my sister, Anna, will be singing along with us. And my brother, Elijah, plays the drums. And then joining us at the show will be Jordan Ramirez playing, and the Human Beings, who I noted, they'll be playing a song with us as well. And then we do have a backing track of kind of the sounds of the album that can't be replicated necessarily on stage, just to augment what is happening. But the lion's share of the music will be coming from my siblings and I.
Could you think of any, when you think of maybe not even the actual music, the actual content, but could you think of any artists that you've kind of looked at as maybe a bit of a template on how to do something like this, where you're recording in one way and then you have to kind of, some bands, it's like we go out, we hash these songs out live, and then we go back and try to, but this is, you're piecing these things together. You said you're more of a technician than a musician, and then you are getting some folks together that maybe played on the album, maybe didn't. Could you think of any other people you've seen kind of do that gave you a little bit of hope?
Yeah, interestingly enough, another, not NEPA based anymore, but Glitterer. I don't know if you were familiar with Glitterer. Rustin's side project it was just kind of him with a bass and a backing track. And that was super inspiring because, like I said, I started this with the intention of it being a solo project. And I mean, I'm learning to play instruments, but I started at this as someone who loves music and can plunk out a tune and write a song, you know, vocally. You know, seeing him get up on stage, and at first I was like, isn't this just karaoke, so to speak, if I'm just going to have like a backing track and very simple instruments and just me singing along to that? And I think that in the modern age, it is more accepted to get up there. But that being said, I always had that anxiety about performing anyway. So I did build out the band to kind of keep me safe and surround me there.
Are there some, you know, logistical challenges, even when you're dealing with people that all live in the area and people that, for the most part, you know, are your relatives? Is there kind of a logistical challenge of just getting everyone together for a rehearsal or for a show or something?
Yeah, so actually, my brother John, like I said, he moved to Pittsburgh during the pandemic.
Yeah.
So he's in for the week now, and we're practicing and recording and just having like a musical week. And there definitely are logistical problems, and it's hugely challenging. But luckily, there's a sibling synergy, I would call it, where you get together and it's like, oh, here we are. We could pick right up back. We haven't practiced in 6 months. Let's pick it up right where we left off. And there's actually a cool platform, and it's free. There's a paid version of it, but it's called Kazam. And I don't know if you've ever heard of this, but
No.
essentially it monitors latency. And, you know, like Zoom, there's probably a delay where if you were playing guitar, I would have a hell of a time trying to keep it in time with you. But Kazam somehow monitors the latency and adjusts accordingly so that you're all in time. So you could, my brother could be in Pittsburgh and connect to with an interface into his laptop, and the rest of the band could be here. And we're plugged into, you know, a mixer or soundboard, and we're having a practice, and you would think he was there with us.
Wow.
So the Kazam is a really cool tool to just keep fresh and keep rehearsed.
Yeah, I think we covered a lot of good material, but is there anything else you wanted to mention about this record or the upcoming show that I didn't ask about?
No, I think we did cover a lot of ground. One thing that I think was really interesting, and we talked about it last time, and, you know, I think a big thing that was revealed to me in the last interview that you conducted with me was how focused on religion I was in that first album. And even the article that came out, I was like, oh man, I'm reading this, I'm hearing my own words, and it feels like almost like I'm coming out as a non-religious person. And I actually struggled with that a lot. Like in the reading of it, I was like, you know, it's more of an appreciation for how you asked the questions and translated them. I was like, you really were able to help me find some clarity with my own thoughts. I know I'm jumping back to an old interview, but I almost had a hesitant. I'm like, how can I, if I share this is like me being like, I'm not religious anymore. And like, my grandmother is on Facebook. Is she going to read this and be upset with me or something like that? And it was just like a really interesting part of the journey was that article. So I really appreciated you reaching out again to talk about this. And certainly there's still some religious themes in the music, and it's because it's what I know, and I'm super inspired by my youth and the nostalgia of it. So those religious themes, like you noted, do persist. But you know, this is more of just a long-winded thank you for you know, the first opportunity to talk.
I'm glad you told me. I appreciate. I appreciate you telling me that. It's very interesting, and sometimes, you know, I think anyone that creates anything, you sometimes don't think how someone's going to read it. You don't. Sometimes I assume the artist isn't even going to read it, especially you know, people have so many things they could look at. So I'm glad you even read it. And then if it created a little anxiety, I'm sorry about that. And then
no,
sounds like you came out of it on the other side. Okay.
I appreciate it.
Just to recap, let's circle everything back. So April 15th is the release of Rattlesnake by Noxen, and April 28th at Karl Hall with Wild Pink and Joe Burke and Company, right? So
yep.
I think that's it, Samuel. Thanks a lot.
Thanks. It's gonna be a hell of a show. I appreciate your time today, and look forward to talking soon.
All right, thanks.